Welcome back to Open Up with Lockie Samuel. I'm sure if you've been following the podcast, you will have realised that I've been on a 2 to 3 month hiatus, and to be honest, that's just so that I could reconnect with myself and figure out where I wanted to take this, because the podcast has been a huge part of my life, my learning experience, and has really helped to shape me as the person that I am today. And so making sure that was aligned and that I was aligning with good people is what I needed to do, and I feel like I've done that. So the first episode back is with someone that I really do appreciate, and that is Bryn from BOYYY. He's, I guess you'd call the Perth podcast pioneer, PPP.
Oh, gee.
So thank you for being here, brother.
Thank you.
First question straight off the bat is, could you describe the way that you view yourself as a man and or human?
I'll probably still give you the same answer as the last time I was on the podcast, which is work in progress.
Yes, I love that.
Work in progress. I've recently realised that the mind likes things that are completed, right?
Yep.
The mind is agitated when things are not complete. You know, if I was to hold a ball in the air now and throw it up in the air, you'd find it difficult to track it until it's stopped again in my hand, and then your mind's happy. And so our mind likes us to be completed and have like these adjectives, which means, yeah, well, I'm like this now. Yeah, I'm done and dusted, tick. But it's just not like that. It's just not like that. And so, yeah, done a work in progress. And the work in progress isn't just me, as we'll dive into in this. It's not just me. It's me as a conduit for psyche and stuff like that. So, yeah.
I love that, conduit for psyche. And it
Yeah.
makes sense considering your previous roles. Did you want to give people a rundown who haven't seen the first podcast, I guess a rundown or like a short synopsis of your background and some of the things that you've been through and overcome?
So, yeah, the last time we were on the podcast, we were talking about essentially how I was the poster boy for a midlife crisis, with the whole affairs and stuff like that. But and I also touched on a brush with a narcissistic ex and stuff like that. And I was trying to make sense of that in the world, and that's led to a really interesting line of inquiry nowadays. But list of things that I've overcome. It's interesting you should ask me this, because I feel like these little time capsules of things that are opening up currently. And so, I went to boarding school for 11 years in an English boarding school. I was there from the age of 8 to 18, and I always look back on that fondly. But then recently, bang, I just opened up and it's like, fuck, there was a whole lot of fucking drama and trauma and stuff that went on there, which, shaped me for greatness, but shaped me for a bit of emotional stunted growth as well. And so, yeah, only just recently I did a podcast with the world leading expert on boarding school syndrome. But yeah, so I went to school, did a degree in psychology, left that, couldn't make head and tail of it. Loved it, but couldn't make head and tail of it. Went away traveling for quite a while, and then came back and did a master's in business psych when I realized, it's not the top and bottom 10% I was interested in, it's the people in the middle, and where do they hang out at work. So yeah, then I went into probably 15, 16 years of being a business management consultant, working in a variety of places, internationally, globally renowned management consultancy, stuff like that. But the bit that underpinned it all was just what the hell people are up to. Because these great ecosystems and monoliths of organizations, they're all dependent on people and what they do. And it's never as straightforward as you think. And, whilst I wasn't overtly an organizational psychologist, I would be a project management, program management, this, that, and the other, but underneath it, there'd be a secondary role that was never really talked about, but always felt. It was always acknowledged, but never given a name. And then, three and a half years ago, I came up with this great idea that after going through a lot of change in life as a 40-year-old, that it would be good to start a podcast for a variety of reasons. And it's just like, WA Real's been like the infinite onion that just keeps opening up and opening it up and makes me cry. With joy and pain in equal measures. Yeah, so that's been it. You know, I've always been fascinated in making sense of the world because I never really was able to myself.
That's amazing. So I guess let's talk about the path you've been on recently. Like obviously WA Real, it was centered primarily around the human experience being in WA. So what's been the shift for you as of late? What's happened for you internally? You talk about like you delving into the psyche. I'm interested to know.
Yeah, so you know, we've had our stay-at-home period, right? I wouldn't necessarily call it lockdown, especially when I speak to my parents back in England. That's a lockdown.
Yeah.
So we had our stay-at-home period, and it was almost for me like my body and a number of things had been preparing me for this period in time. I didn't realise it, but when it started to happen, I was like, oh yeah, there you go. And so it's really been an invitation to go inside and starting to investigate. Well, just wasn't even a conscious investigation. It's almost been a driven part to go back inside. You know, I've spoken about Kenzo and Satori, where, you know, one's an invitation to go and journey inside, and the other one's like a smack round the back of the head from life. Go fucking look inside.
Yeah.
Right. And there was sort of a nice mixture of the two, and so, you know, it would have been easy to get wrapped up in the outside world and wanting to know and this, that, and the other, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But it's really been a journey back and back and back and back and back. And then as I started to journey back, all of a sudden the podcast guests came along and the line of inquiry started to open out. And so I think whilst WA Real has always been Bryn's sort of, at times, passive voyeur, watch a window into life, recently, if you watch it over the last couple of months, it's actually Bryn's journey into self, psyche, and more sort of stuff. So, yeah.
How does that feel for you, and how has that been received?
For me, it's been hugely confronting, and we'll get into some of the details to explain why in a minute. But it's actually been I've had to seriously go. Well, sometimes I think it's seriously go into the places that are dark, but also, like I said, there's these time capsules. I honestly believe that. I think one of the biggest myths we have going at the moment is that we are consciously doing all the work, right? Yeah. We're 100% doing the conscious work all the time. You know, I'm building the best me. I'm doing the thing. I'm building the company. I'm doing the fucking business. You know, and it's a myth, right? You're part of it, but also there are these really strong, deep parts of psyche that are moving you. You know, when last time when I was on here and, you know, we talked about the midlife alignment, you know, that's when I started to go back to some of the reading of Carl Jung. I've done a lot of reading of that in the last years. And that helped me to understand really what was going on. And we spend so much time up in this conscious world thinking that we're in control. And we'll talk about this in a minute. And it's a myth.
Yeah.
It's an absolute myth, right? And that's half the reason why we're running around like busy fucking idiots right now, trying to grab onto control, you know. And it's kind of why I wanted to, you know, you put the post out the other week, like, I'm going to take this thing I'm going to take this direction into looking at conspiracies and stuff like that. And that's why I thought, oh, I'll reach out, because there's some really important stuff which I see at the moment that is just people are getting swept up in stuff and the tide is going out, and if you haven't stuck your pole in the ground, you're going to get swept away.
Yeah.
And that's half the reason why when you said, oh, I want to investigate conspiracies and stuff like that, I thought, I'm going to come and have a chat because, despite what we may talk about and what I, come across, as knowledgeable as I might come across in a minute, I'm still fucking human. I've dived into stuff and this, that, and the other. The podcast is called BOYYY Real, and it is affiliated by name and structure to London Real. And we've seen where Brian's gone with his. It's like conspiracy central at the moment. And I can understand why he's done that. When you're on a roll, keep rolling. And there's lots of things within the ocean that we swim that would encourage that.
Yeah.
So I kind of, without taking control of your podcast, and I'll let you have it back in a minute, I was going to ask you, why were you interested in diving into conspiracies and things like that?
I think for me...
Does it help contextualise some of the things that we can share here?
Yeah, the first time I seen anything about a conspiracy theory was when I first watched Zeitgeist. It would have been like the end of high school. I was like, what do you mean September 11 could be an inside job? And I realized that growing up, speaking about that wasn't acceptable.
Yeah.
And if I did speak about it, I quickly got shamed into suppressing it.
Yes.
And then if I did speak up even more, I get shamed even more.
Yeah.
And so I just learned how to suppress my beliefs around conspiracy theories, or even giving myself the option to dive into it.
Yes.
Until all this started kicking off with COVID, and started thinking, hang on a second, like this doesn't seem quite right. Things don't seem to line up. And so I started diving into that again, and I just realized that same pattern, that I was delving into something and doing it, I guess, as a hermit.
Yes.
Doing it without anyone knowing in private, because in mental health, I'm very much supported, held and loved in that space. And it's very easy for me to be this version of me who is the good boy, who is vulnerable, who respects people.
Yeah.
And for me to come out and express a belief in a conspiracy theory had people challenge me. And I found that really, really hard. And so for me, delving into this and going into this is me learning, much like BOYYY Real was Bryn's journey. This is my journey, learning how to speak my quote unquote truth.
Yeah.
And learn how to come up against challenges, learn more about what it is that I believe or intending to believe, just so I have a better perspective.
And if you find your truth, let alone talk your truth, what will that give you?
I think I will feel authentic, and I'll feel recognized for who I actually am.
Yeah.
It'll make me feel powerful, to be honest.
There we go. You'll also, without putting words in your mouth, will it give you a sense of knowing as well? Yes.
Yeah. Because at the moment, with the way that I've been showing up most of my life since watching Zeitgeist, I know that I haven't been showing up powerfully because I've been too scared to talk about that stuff. And so that's, internally, I know I am not being 100% authentic, even though I am vulnerable to an extent with my emotions and expressing that.
Yeah.
That's become my comfort zone and my safety net. So now I have to expand further and step more into me.
Yeah. And that would certainly link in, because you talked about shame.
Mm-hmm.
Shame and guilt we'll come back to shame and guilt. They're one of the most weaponized tools that are out there at the moment.
Yep.
And they're all part of our codependency on the world. But, you've also talked about, you've started to come into your emotions. Conspiracies also give us a sense of knowing. And when we feel like we know, then we have a sense of control.
Yep.
And if we have a sense of control, then we feel all good in the world. And therefore our nervous system can start to down-regulate itself.
Yeah.
Because our nervous system doesn't like it when we don't know, because we're out of control.
Mm-hmm.
And this is really interesting because at some point in our lives, and this is just part of the human journey, within the human journey, there is suffering, right? Until such time as we all know, recognize, embody, and feel that suffering is part of the human journey, it's going to be part of the human journey, right?
Yep.
When we all have that epiphany, then we can move on from it. But we are certainly not there. And so at some point in our lives, in our early lives, and, you know, for me, it was possibly around going to boarding school. For you, you know, you came on my podcast and talked about how, you know, you'd suffered abuse and stuff like that. Even if, and in a strange kind of way, and I'm going to come back to this later, in a strange kind of way, we were lucky that ours is so obvious. Because for many, it can be lots of little things.
Yeah.
Which is why you end up with like complex stuff. But my understanding, and this is, you know, a subset of one, but also, you know, I sit and chat and listen to people as well. And it's an emerging hypothesis, is that if you go back to the dynamics of how your original trauma when you were a child, so, you know, the seed dropped into the ground and the little sapling started to grow. Mm-hmm. And then at some point, someone decided to put a splint on the sapling because it's going to grow this way, not that way, because somebody decided, right? Yep. And that something was reality, as you brush up and collide against reality. And then at some point, you would have questioned yourself. You would have not known what was going on. You would have felt out of control, and then emotions would have turned up that you wouldn't know how to deal with, right? And at that point, that's when you start to split or have a schism. That's when you create your survival self, your survival personality. And that's when you almost split between, you have this split between what is going to be your survival outward-facing persona, and a beautiful phrase that I've just been introduced to recently is your inner indigenous.
Oh, that's cool.
It's beautiful, that, isn't it? Beautiful. I really like it. And so that persona then doesn't want to be out of control, doesn't want to be left not knowing, doesn't want to feel these awkward emotions again because it doesn't know how to deal with it.
Yep.
And because we don't recognize in the world that there is this eponymous suffering, no one's around to help you. So you create it by yourself. You create it at a young age. And that's the persona that you go into the world with, right? That's what you go into, and you created it as that child self. That's why when, you know, shit gets a bit wild and wacky, you know, the child comes out. That's why, you know, as blunt as it is at the moment, there ain't many adults around. There ain't many grown-ups. There's a lot of fucking kids running around,
yep.
like blurring out on social media, and we'll come into that in a bit, you know. But, you know, it's been, I talked about this with Richard Gradden in my podcast this week, was that, you know, at the age of 45, I looked around going, well, when are the grown-ups going to turn up? And I'm like, oh, fuck, that's me. Right, but we'll come to that in a bit. And so you go into the world with this persona, this protective persona, this kind of closed down that doesn't want to feel, needs to be in control and needs to know, mm-hmm. right? And then we get, and you know, part of that immediate response as well is fight, flight, freeze or fawn.
Yep.
Freeze and fawn, you know, are more often the chosen one, which is the birthplace of codependency, which we go into the rest of the world with. You know, if you get into the fight, then, you know, maybe there's grounds there for the true covert, the true classic psychopath narcissist, but, you know, we'll come to that in a bit. So you go into this world and you need to know stuff. You need to know. You get addicted to needing to know because you get addicted to being in control.
Yep.
And you get addicted to controlling your emotions. And you get addicted, if you go down the codependency route, which is probably 95% of the population, you get addicted into this almost like slave-master relationship. You know, there'll be these external figures that have, you know, shamed or guilted you. And so at that point, we get this real addiction to knowing. And so you take that now, things are stressful, things are unknown, we don't know how to feel about this. this is taking us back to our original trauma. So fuck, what do I need to do to down-regulate my nervous system and feel okay in the world? Yep. Well, fuck it, I need to get on BBC, CNN, this, that, and the other, and learn the narrative. You know, go and watch the news, go and watch The Project, which is a terrible piece of media.
Yeah, I agree.
And you listen to the narrative, and then what happens? You know, and let's not forget, you know, I'm 45, so I grew up in a pre-digital era, right? When there was 3 TV channels, right? And I remember when the 4th one turned up, Channel 4 in the UK, you know, and it's proliferated. This is even before social media, you know. So where do you go and get your knowledge, which you need to feed your addiction of knowing, right? And let's remember that addiction to knowing then gets encouraged and culturalized, you know, at school, you know, get it right, don't look stupid, right? Go into the workplace, get it right, don't look stupid. You talking about when 9/11 didn't work, it was an inside job. Oh, fuck that. Oh, all right, I don't want to look stupid. Yeah. You know, shamed in. And so we want to know. We need to know because we can't deal with our emotions, because we can't deal with our nervous system, which gets so easily upregulated, and not just by ourselves, but by the people around us, because we all interact. Yeah. We need to know. It's a defense mechanism against it all. And so, you know, people look at the standard narrative, and it doesn't take somebody with a reasonable level of IQ to start realizing certain things are not adding up. And more people have been just felt uneasy about the way things are. And that's really unsurprising on so many different levels. But, you know, you get to this point where there's almost like this crack where you go, fuck, I can't believe that, you know, the standard narrative just doesn't add up. Or somebody comes in with just like a, boo, there's something different, like zeitgeist, or boo, something like, you know, oh, it's something different, boo, drops it. And then all of a sudden, you know, you watch something like Zeitgeist and you're like, fuck, I know. That's not real. And when that little boo turns up, what happens? Well, you feel stupid momentarily because you're like, oh, I believe that 9/11 was actually by those guys who nicked the planes and drove it in. And then when this thing comes in, it reenacts it like, oh, I believe that. And it wasn't. Now this guy's saying that it's not. And so, fuck, I'm confused again. Oh, I don't like that. And so what you see is what we see a lot of at the moment is people swing like a pendulum from one place to another, right? And let's not forget, like, you've got the TV, you've got the radio, you've got the standard streams of media, which is putting out the mainstream narrative, right? But, you know, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, they're no fucking different. In fact, I would argue that they're even worse.
Because they can censor what people post. And for the most part, they are at the moment.
That's a small part of it. You know, like, I guess, to me, right now, and this is really blunt, you know, if you're getting swept away with YouTube censorization or Facebook censorization, Jeffrey Epstein, vaccinations, what else have we got going? Is COVID real or is it not? Yeah. You know, any of those, right? You are actually missing the bigger conspiracy, right? Because...
Which is?
Right, the stories are fucking irrelevant. Right, the stories are irrelevant. Like, and right now there's going to be loads of people watching this going, fuck, how can you say that? You know, paedophile rings and that's just fucking terrible. How can you say that? How can you say that? And I am saying it, right? Yeah. Yeah, they are terrible. Don't get me wrong. I'm not devoid of emotion. I'm not human, right? Each line of inquiry probably has its own merit, right? Yeah. That needs to be continued, right? But to get online and be fucking circulating posts about, oh, check out this, check out that, check out the other. To even go on a march with a placard and go, we need to stop you're missing the bigger point, right? And like, let's just take mainstream media, right? It seems all kind and benevolent and stuff. It's the TV, it's the radio and stuff, but it's one narrative pretty much, and it's pretty much fear-based. And now we're seeing the introduction of shame and guilt. Like, do the right thing and be a good citizen, and oh my God, people were left in a hotel and then they started shagging. That's just terrible, right? And we'll come back to this in a bit, because there is such a blind sight in the disparity between policy and public perception and the true nature of the human.
Yeah.
Right. You leave people alone in a hotel and they get bored, they're going to start shagging. They fucking will, right? Yeah, you make a hard border and two girls want to get across for a party, fucking do it. I've done stuff that I'm not really supposed to have done. You've done stuff. We've all fucking done it, because we're all fucking humans, right? And, go easy on yourself. But, if we actually go over to social media, and let's just to close out another point, you see people who get this crack, like, oh, I used to believe this. Fuck. I need to believe, what is the next thing? So you swing quickly to the other side. And because you can't handle the tension of the not knowing, right? And I've talked quite a lot of it recently. I did a whole 1.5-hour presentation that's out there about addiction to knowing and not knowing, and how holding tension of opposites and sitting in not knowing is a place to birth the third place. Switching from one place to another, to go, all right, mainstream media's fucked, so I'm over here. I'm with the QAnon and this, that, and the other, and because they're the dudes who know.
Guilty.
Well, yeah. But if you break it down into a mechanical, behavioural, dynamic point of view, you're doing the same thing, right? You are looking for the outside world to give you knowledge about something you actually fucking know nothing about.
Yeah.
Right. I don't know anything about Charles Epstein. I knew when he popped up, just because I watched, 4 episodes on fucking Netflix about him, which I did, right? Doesn't necessarily mean I know anything more about him, right?
Yeah.
I've just been given the narrative from somebody else. And because we spend so much time looking for outside narratives instead of looking for inside narratives, we're like little sponges just waiting to happen. But what's more pervasive, what's even worse and more pervasive about social media, and it was Professor Sam Vaknin that opened me up to this one, was if you just look at the inherent fucking design of social media, there is no good in it, right? One of the fundamental parts of the design of social media, so you've got Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, let's just think about Instagram, right? What is it? Oh, I'll put a picture up, right? With a few, and here's a newsflash for anyone who writes more than like 2 lines underneath a picture on Instagram. No one fucking reads it. You look at it and you see this massive post this big, like, fuck that, I'm not reading it. This is Instagram. It's just pictures. Like, sping. I want to look at a pretty picture. And what are most of the pretty pictures? Like, people doing a fucking selfie, right? Or chitter chatter on the thing. And it's just like, it is narcissism writ large. Narcissism is, the maintenance of the reflection. And we talk about earlier on about the survival persona that we talked about. That's just trying to play out this persona further. And then Twitter, I have barely anything to do with it, but that seems like a cesspit for unrequited anger. And we'll come further to that in a sec. And Facebook seems to be a whole amalgamation of the two. It's the granddaddy of it. But at the basis of it, the design is all around relative positioning, right?
Yeah.
Where am I against you? But also, where am I against myself? I did this post last week. It got 100 likes. I did this post this week. It got 50 likes. Am I half as popular as I was last week? And it's all relative positioning for me and you against comments and likes and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And all that's doing is encouraging this. You know, we can talk about, oh yeah, I did authentically share on social media, but the essence of it is you didn't, right? Yeah. You don't. You go a long way towards it, but still in the back of your mind or deep in your psyche, you're somewhere going, oh, I hope people like this. I wonder how many people will like it. Or that moment of sharing and then clicking submit. But then afterwards it'd be like, oh, who said what about it? And then you're into that loop again, which does nothing but create, reinforce this false sense of self, devoid from the inner indigenous, and also maintain a level of anxiety. So how do you get rid of the anxiety? Well, you go back on and check, and then, or you put another post up, and then you get addicted, and you get addicted, and you get addicted. But also, I'm not just relative positioning to myself, I'm relatively positioning to you. So I'm like, you know, you do a podcast, I do a podcast, all of a sudden I'm like, oh, fuck, look, Lucky's got more fucking followers on his page than I have. And he's doing this. Oh, I need to up or do this or do that. And we're all like relatively positioning off one another, and it just, and it escalates. And the truth of the matter is that, you know, we're fishes in the ocean, and we're fishes who've gone into a new ocean, and we are completely unaware of the ocean that we're swimming in. And so, you know, you take that in the world of conspiracy and wanting to know, because, you know, we like to know, we like predictable outcomes. I'll come back to predictable outcomes and the influence of that in sales and marketing in a bit if you want.
So what was the old ocean? What's the new ocean?
Old version of
the new ocean, the
new ocean was probably before we had social media. It was probably just like a lukewarm version with you know, like 3 channels on the TV and newspaper that used to present facts so that we could make up our own mind, as opposed to what we have now is newspapers who tell us what to think. Significant different, you know. I mean, for fuck's sake, like, since when did what goes on in a reality TV show become newsworthy? What the fuck? Seriously, you know, why do we have news articles on what goes on in a reality TV show? Why are people on The Project, if it's supposed to be news done differently, talking about a reality TV show? I mean, how fucking inane is it, right? How fucking narcissistic is it, or aspiring to be narcissistic? That's probably the worst bit. A large amount of this, and Professor Sam talked about narcissism being the organizing principle of society, which is fucking scary. Because, you know, there's only a small percentage of people who are actually successful narcissists.
Right. And when you say, just so people understand, just in case they're not aware of narcissism, when you're saying it, what do you mean?
So narcissism comes from the Greek myth of Narcissus. And basically, this guy looked into the river or the pond or whatever, and he saw this reflection of himself, and he fell in love with it, so much so that he didn't eat or drink, and then he died, right? And so, but the point is that it's not that he fell in love with himself, he fell in love with his reflection.
Oh, that's cool.
It's his reflection, right? And if you go back to what we started this with, which is that when we have this split and this schism, and we create this strategic survival persona that helps to protect us in the world, protect our inner indigenous, and then often we forget about the inner indigenous. Well, you know, that needs to be maintained. That takes energy. That requires maintenance. And after a period of time of that, and everything that comes with that in that are addictions to knowing, addictions to having masters, addictions to having, you know, dealing with our emotions, like managing our emotions. And so, you know, let's go back to Facebook, Instagram, things like that. You know, it's like, how do people perceive me? How do they perceive my reflection? It's two of the same. And so, you know, more and more, you know, Professor Sam talked about there's healthy narcissism. Otherwise, we'd never leave the leg of our mum. We would never walk off, right? So you do need to have some to go out into the world and form a well-formed, sense of self and ego.
Yep.
There's too much in the infrastructure of the world and society right now, which is encouraging this sort of almost toxic part of it. Reality TV shows. They're cheap, which is why they're on the TV, and all the real content's on Netflix and other places. That's why they can't afford to compete. Yep. So then they give us this like lowbrow shit of reality TV. Farmer Wants a Wife, cooking program, Big Brother. They're all there. Cheap TV, but also what is it? It's people just I'm on TV, so I'm going to have to be. They can try and be as authentic as they want, but they've got fucking microphones on them. They've got fucking cameras looking at them.
Yeah.
Watching all the time.
And that's one thing I encountered when I went through like the final stages of Survivor. Yes. And I was thinking, man, I know the narrative is going to be that because I'm in mental health, they're going to push someone to push my buttons. And like, how will I show up? And that caused a genuine fear because I was like, fuck, I don't know how I'll show up. Because I'll be trying to be Mr. Mental Health on TV, yet inside, I'll probably want to deck someone.
Yeah. And then now we've got the disparage, the distance between the false self and the truth of who you are. Because you probably wanted to deck someone, Yeah, and I guess for me, right, this is my emerging truth right now. Is that
I love that phrase, emerging truth.
This is my emerging truth right now, and it is this. Bearing in mind what I said right at the start of this podcast, that I'm work in progress.
Yes.
Right. Is that I have no idea actually who I am, what I'm doing, what I believe in, what my values are, what to think, and what the fuck is going on.
Yeah.
Right. I honestly don't. And I'm all good with that. I at the start of COVID, I spoke to people like Peter Sage, and I've also recently spoke to people like, Dr. Judy Wiley-Munn, who's done all the work in the vaccines and stuff. And I was really interested in their stories. And so, I wanted to know, and in part use the podcast to try and speak to people, try and get that sense of highfalutin knowing about what was going on. But it just didn't sit. And then I think because of that, I started to get myself in conversations with people who were like, so do you think COVID's real or not? And my response is actually probably more confronting than yes and no. It's, I don't know. There's space for yes, there's space for no. But the truth of the matter is, I don't know. And I'm all good with that. And that's not the laissez-faire, like, oh, I don't know, dude, I'm just going to smoke a joint and go fucking surf and chill out. No, I consciously am saying, I don't know. I don't know, and I don't know who I am in the world. I've had this crack and awareness into my strategic survival persona. And now I start to feel more of my inner indigenous come out. But I really don't know who the inner indigenous is. And I'm really excited about getting to know.
That's amazing.
That.
How do you, in that space of not knowingness and being open and receptive, like so openly, you spoke about the tide going out and you have to put your staff in the ground.
Yeah.
I guess to stay standing. How do you do that from that space?
I think it's by actually truly dropping into the abyss, right? And we're now getting down to existentialism. Mm-hmm. Right, because if I'm sitting here saying I don't know who I am, right, we by actually dropping into the abyss, dropping into the darkness, where things are fucking untidy and you question everything in the world, it's only in that darkness and actually staying in the darkness, not trying to grab your way out. It's only in that darkness that you'll actually begin to find a light. You'll actually begin to find something that sits true for you. The trick and the mistake that we often make, and I've done it before, is, you have this strategic survival self, right? And that's almost like an underlying persona. And then you create bits on top of it, so there's been like school Bryn, and then there's been management consultant Bryn, and then there's been, podcast Bryn as well. But underneath has been the strategic persona. And often what happens is the stories, one of the things that's become crystal clear in all the podcasts that I've done is that people have taken on board stories, and then the story has been their greatest, drive, and they've done the thing, swam to the place, or built the business, or this, that, and the other. But then the story has gone past its sell-by date. The angel turns into a demon, and then it's fucking the place up, right? And then, the relationships tear down, businesses get lost, health is lost, stuff like that. And that's because we're not being sensitive to the fact that the story that you took on board to tell yourself as part of your persona helped to protect you at that point and drive you.
Yep.
But has now run its course. And one of the biggest concerns, and I've done it before, where it's like you feel one going, and then it's like, oh, I need to build a new one, because I need to know, and I need to skip. And if I'm going to be blunt, like a vast majority of the personal development space is centered around this, anything where you hear the whole build the best version of yourself, right? Brian's a big one for that. Build the best version of yourself.
That's an easy sell, though.
That's an easy sell, yeah. But this is where sales and marketing come in, right? Mm-hmm. Because deep down, right, whether you're doing it or not, right, this is the mechanics of what's going on in the modern day sales and marketing. Bearing in mind, we're in a consumerist capitalist system, right? And the consumerist bit is the most important, because we've been buying shit we don't need for so fucking long, right? Because we've been programmed up for it, you know. Why do we all want to buy a house? Because of the American dream. Who's birthed the American dream? Bankers. Why? Because then we're all getting fucking mortgage, right? Let's even go engagement rings. Who came up with the idea of a diamond for an engagement ring?
Diamond mines?
De Beers, yes. One of the biggest diamond mines. Yeah, show her that you love her with a diamond. Oh, that's fucking awesome for them, isn't it? So, sales and marketing, in effect, preys on the fact that, we don't know. We need the thing to help solution. We love predictable outcomes, know. Come on the course, and in 6 weeks' time, I'll give you fucking ripped abs, or come on the course, and in 7 weeks, we'll have your shadow work done and dusted. Like, fuck off, right? That's just because we want predictable. We want something to grab onto. We want something. And so a large amount of the personal development work is helping people to skip from one false self to another false self.
Yeah.
Right. And, and also, we'll get into this bit, but, one of the biggest advocates for that is, the grandfather of it all, fucking Tony Robbins, right? It's almost psychopathic what he does. He's got so much money. Why does he still charge people? Why does it still cost X amount of thousand to go to one of his events? If you truly love the world, fucking do it for free. And then you'll hear this whole capitalist shit of, oh, well, people don't value what they don't pay for, and all that crap, which is convenient to keep things going up. So we get this, it's easy for, it's our human nature. It's part of our survival self that wants to trick ourselves from moving from one story to another story to another story.
Yeah.
So when we actually get to those bits where it all caves in, someone asked me not so long ago, what's the real in WA real, right? And my response is, there's nothing more real than an ending. And WA real is about the ending of stories. Essentially, that's cool. What I dive into. People have the epiphanies at the end of a story. Now, that is such a delicate place, because the first thing you want to do, when you let go of the side of the swimming pool, is you just want to grab the other side of the swimming pool.
Yeah.
As opposed to spend some time getting happy in the deep. And so it's about that sitting in the darkness, right? And sitting there and dropping into feeling depressed, dropping into being anxious, and truly, truly, truly feeling it. You know, Jung put it that most neuroses are a point where we have this drive to avoid all suffering, right? You can't avoid suffering. We started this until we all have the epiphany about suffering. Suffering is a fact of life. So there is legitimate suffering, right? And then there's, above and beyond. And so because we are so desensitized, or not even desensitized, because we're so weak, I mean, our capacity to avoid suffering is fucking like a great strong muscle. If they're opposing muscles, but our capacity to deal with suffering is like a muscle that's atrophied to fuck. And so at that point where it's like, oh fuck, I don't know what's going on. I am out of control. I've got these strange fucking feelings that are all over the shop. I am so lost, and it gets all dreamy because your whole fucking grasp on reality is just, whoa, and you feel like you're dropping. My advice to you is to continue to drop, right? And that's counterintuitive to what large amount of narrative around it is, and it is drop, because we're not as much as we think we are in terms of our persona.
Yep.
We man have built our own persona. So the idea of skipping from one persona to another, build your best version. Well, what are you going to do? You're going to build it with the same mind that built the other one, and that's fucked. So, but you are more than you think you are if you drop into it. If you actually drop into it, and anybody who, you've talked about shadow stuff recently, anybody who starts to realize that they have a shadow, and I can talk about how that forms in a minute if you want.
Yeah,
anybody drops into their shadow and realize that there's dark parts of themselves. Well, guess what? You just increase the landmass of who you are, because you thought you were good, and then you realize you're bad as well. So guess what? You thought you were this big, but you're actually now this big. So when I talk about believing something bigger than yourself, start with yourself. All right, worry about God later, and so so it's that dropping in, and
so would you say it's dropping into the shadow or dropping into the motion, or like a mixture of both?
So the shadow is,
because like obviously we're energetic beings, so like emotion makes sense, but
yeah, it's all, it's as with all of this, right? I mean, we would love to reduce it down to absolutes. Well, it's this and then it's that, right? And that's part of our mind, and that's part of, in our, without banging on about social media, that's managed to reduce our concentration span to that less of a goldfish now.
Yeah.
And in order for us to start doing some critical thinking, and most importantly, critical feeling, right? Mm-hmm. We've got to recognize that this shit is big, it's complex, it's nuanced, and it's interrelated. It's way more interrelated than it needs to be because we've allowed it to be.
Yeah.
Right. And we're seeing that with the collapse of everything. So like the shadow, if you remember, is one archetype amongst many. And archetypes are there just to, Jung created archetypes, which created the idea of a shadow. He created those as just a way for us to consciously get our arms around what the unconscious, what the psyche's actually up to, right? And so, and the shadow is just one part. In fact, scarily enough, the shadow is the entry into the bigger work. Jung referred to the shadow as, integrating the shadow is the work of the apprentice. It's the apprentice piece. The masterpiece comes afterwards, which is fucking scary.
It is.
It's fucking scary.
It just gave me anxiety.
Yeah. Good. In a good way.
Yes.
So yeah, I mean, look, large amounts of our shadow also get built as we have this persona, this strategic persona. We get to this place usually, and often it happens sort of latter 30s, early 40s, where you go into the world and you create your own sense of individuality. So I am good, I'm not bad, I'm generous, I'm not stingy, I'm a good lover, not a crap lover, and this, that, and the other. And so every time you say I'm not this, you put it in a box and you put it in a warehouse, right? Where you put it in the basement of your individual unconscious, not the collective.
Yeah.
But it's probably leaking in there as well. You're putting it down in your individual unconscious, and you can only go so far in life before the basement gets pretty fucking stinky with all the shit you've put in it, and you haven't got the energy to keep the door closed, and you haven't got the energy to maintain this single version of yourself that you've been putting out to the world, right? And that's where you just, I mean, when we spoke before, that's what I was talking about, you know. This is the process. What we spoke about was my subjective experience of the process, right? But this is the process, right? That seems to be this gentle, quiet, and weaving thread that goes through part of our lives, and we all do it, you know. And in years gone by, indigenous cultures would have initiations for different parts in life, and you'd move from one part. We don't have any of that. We're all fucking lost, right? And, you know, we've taken the markers out. And so then you see this collapse. And that's when, you know, you drop into the darkness, because you drop into the darkness of your basement. And that's where you've been hiding a lot of your defenses, who you think you're not, and all the things that are happening. And there are darker things even below that, which sometimes you can sort of drop into. And so, yeah, it can be super confronting. And if you're not, you know, we just don't simply accommodate and talk about this stuff, you know. I mean, look, it's my militant view, but more people should be aware of the work of Jung, or the basics of the work of Jung.
Yeah.
Because he was charting some of the stuff that goes very deep through, you know, and that's, if I'm honest, you know, I've done WA Real for a whole number of reasons, but one of the ones that I've been less vocal about is it's been an enormous research project for me to start to see the similarities and the patterns that seem to go on. And so when we have this, like, you know, these schisms, like big schisms, and we can have them along the, well, sorry, let's not use the word schism because I used it before. When we have these like breaks because our persona has just lost we haven't got the energy to continue. That's why we're fucking mentally fatigued and all of that sort of stuff. Mentally, physically, spiritually fatigued, because we're trying to maintain this stuff. And that's when it's just time to allow, let go, drop in, and allow and surrender. Like, sounds like the most passive words. They're the most fucking active things to fucking do. And it's stay and stay and stay, and not grab the phone, and not speak to the friend who's going to make you feel better and go, yeah, but you're all right, Lockie, you're a good bloke. And it's like, no, I've got to sit with the fact that I'm a wanker for just a couple more days. And I may need to get the journal out and fucking write about what a wanker have been. And yeah, you know, as you have these epiphanies about, oh, you know, it's own it, but don't beat yourself up about it. Feel the shame, feel the guilt, go into it. It will pass. You will have processed it. You don't always need to ring up all your old girlfriends and say sorry. You can just sit quietly and energetically blow them a kiss and say sorry, and they'll feel it, and you'll feel it, and stuff like that. And it's the more we can stay with that, and you know, there does get to these crescendo. I mean, I can only talk up until the age of 45, right? I'm aware that there's another one of these peaks at the age of sort of 56, but I can't talk about that because I'm not there and I haven't met anyone who's done it yet. But you know, there are these crescendos where you get to the apex of what I call the individual power, and then it blows down. It's not to say you're not going to have insights along the way, but you know, it's like when it comes to, you know, enlightenment, you know, the old adage is, what's before enlightenment? Chopping wood.
Oh, okay.
What's after enlightenment?
Chopping wood?
Correct. Right? And it strikes me that what we've been doing, because we don't like work and we don't like things, is we've just gone straight to the enlightenment. That's why there's just like so many, like, I enjoy them, but you know, there's so many, oh, come and do the cacao and the breath work and the ice bath, right? And then we'll get enlightenment. Like, no, well, yeah, it helps. And I love those things. I go to sound healing. I love it. But it's set within the context of the fact that I need to chop fucking wood to enjoy enlightenment. Enlightenment just doesn't turn up because you chase it.
Yeah.
You have to chop fucking wood. And that means just doing mundane shit, right? And I remember being at the age of, early 20s. I used to, just because I finished university, didn't say I stopped reading. And I was reading all this young stuff, and I got it. Like, cognitively, I got it. I really got it. Like, I was the fucking cleverest boy out. I knew my persona was fucking wired in. I hadn't chopped enough wood. I had not chopped enough wood. And now at the age of 45, recently, with this epiphany of, I think I might be a grown-up. I'm like, oh, fuck, I've been chopping wood, haven't I? I have been chopping wood. So as we were saying, before enlightenment, chopping wood. After enlightenment, chopping wood. Just do life. And in life, there is... One of the biggest mistakes I made was thinking that just because I had a couple of degrees in psychology, I was fucking anaesthetised from life's pain, right? It was great. And I think that's part of why I did it. I wanted to make sense in the world having come out of boarding school. But no. And it's only recently conversing with somebody who's quite dear to me that she sort of said, no, I go through a lot of drama. And it's like, but half the time I think I need the drama to get the framework to understand what's going on. And it's like, yeah, you can cognitively understand how to chop wood, but you have to get your fucking hands dirty, and you have to get calluses on your hand of chopping wood, and there is the just doing life, and there is just that in it. I wanted to be where I am now at the age of like 29, 30. Fortunately, that wasn't the case. I had to go and do a shit ton of drama to get to the place, which we talked about the last time. But at the same time, that's not to undo or talk down to anybody who has epiphanies along the way. I think you get epiphanies, and then there's just this like enormous embodiment of an epiphany, and that's something probably else worth talking about, because within the friction of where we're at the moment, there's no doubting that the world is changing. There's no doubting that things are wonky. And things are strange, and you can go out and blame the whole world. Bill Gates is doing this, and fucking Fauci's doing that, and stuff like that. But that's an easy cop out.
Yeah,
that's a fucking easy cop out, and that's very much the mindset of a codependent person, which is that I can blame the master, and so therefore I can be the subservient slave. And yeah, Richard Grannon, who I spoke to this week, he put forward a very interesting thing that So, in the end, after the Second World War, we created this consumerist capitalist society, and we put energy into it, and and people who were part of that, like Freud's nephew or cousin, Bernays, they created this thing, like in the Madman area,
wow.
And now it's just snowballed out of effect, out of control, and all the people who were originally controlling the machine have all fucking died. And so it's just and Richard puts forward a really interesting idea that there are clever people like Gates who ride the wave, but nobody's actually steering the ship, and really half of it is just coming about through our own compliance and our acquiescence. And our acquiescence doesn't, just not acquiesce doesn't necessarily mean like we fucking rip our shirts off. And I saw one young man on Facebook the other day going, "You need to find your fucking spine and fucking get out there and fight for your rights." It's like, well, yeah, okay. That's one thing. I think there's some anger there that's and yeah, like again, social media is this great place whereby, previously in indigenous tribes would dance and chant and have a medicine man and this, that and the other, because they understood there were dark forces inside of man. You're from a Maori background, so you'll know way more than I do, because I'm from England. Our what we were like has been shredded to all belief. Like I have no idea where we're from, like pagan rituals, maybe something like that. I don't know. But so but within them, within the stories, within the ceremonies, within this, they would recognise that there was darkness in man, and that was dealt with, and it was brought out in a constructive and productive way.
Yeah.
in the world of false self, devoid from the true indigenous that has the id, that has the primal drives in it. No, we're all rationalized and enlightened people now. We don't do that shit. Well, bullshit. We're all fucking humans. And so what's happening now is, because it's not being legitimately brought out or carefully brought out, it plays out into this cesspit of social media where nobody's there, and it's just like bile is spewed out into there, and it's almost like a reflection of all the negative drama and psychic tension that is just human, but is not like acknowledged and dealt with, and it plays out. Like, Twitter is the worst for it. Like, fuck. But then, you've only got to put something in, like, oh yeah, well, you're a dick, and and we can't handle tension of opposites, so we cancel each other out. Well, just fucking defriend you.
That's a good point, because when you speak about chopping wood, enlightenment, chopping wood, essentially like allowing and feeling into what it feels like to feel, whether it's darkness or like low vibration emotion, that's been something that's hugely changed my life, because I was this person who cognitively hadn't unpacked and delved into my trauma, but I hadn't felt it. I hadn't fully felt it until I went and did San Pedro, and I was like forced to feel like everything. And I cried.
In this is your unconscious. Your muscles, your fascia, your nerves, everything.
I cried more than I cried in that like 1 5-minute period my entire life.
Yeah.
And I think in that moment I was like, holy shit, there's more to emotion than I knew. And so it's been a work in progress over the last 3 or so months, learning how to sit in it.
Yes.
And so when I made the decision to change direction, it's very uncomfortable for me. Like, it's very uncomfortable for me to post this stuff and to get challenged.
Yeah.
And I was noticing that I was tensing up and either shutting down, shutting other people down, turning up as an asshole that was sarcastic because I was avoiding confrontation.
Yes.
But as soon as I delved into, okay, like, it looks like I'm avoiding confrontation. What does it feel like? Even now, I'm getting goosebumps.
Yeah.
What does it feel like to have someone challenge me? And I was like, oh, fuck, that's my inner child who was getting shut down, who's showing up.
Shut down, yes.
Yeah, who's showing up now. And it's like, holy fuck, I don't need to be scared of confrontation.
100%. You don't need to be, we collide. Mm-hmm. There is suffering, we collide, and it's all okay, right? People will have different opinions. My truth will be different from your truth.
Yes.
That's okay.
It's one of the big nuggets I've taken from the last 3 days.
That's okay. And also, there is suffering in the world, right?
Yeah.
And suffering, like I said, until such time as we all get epiphanized, right? The suffering will continue. And also, we don't necessarily have to save others from suffering, because we disenable people.
Yeah.
And so often what happens, and I've been diving into this recently, and I'm trying to get a guy on the podcast to come and talk about this at length, is that often what happens is, we have these, like now, we'll have these tensions, we'll have this stuff, it's going on, it's all becoming a crucible, and, fault lines are moving within our own psyche. I think even deeper within the collective psyche. I think we're moving from one ideology to another, which is enormous. We haven't done that for like 5, 7, 8,000 years, which is awesome. And we get a front seat. That's why we're here. And when these shifts occur, when that happens, at that point I was just talking about when, so often you want to grab from one persona to another, from one control thing to another. When you do actually drop, even if you drop a bit in, right, and this, that, and the other, that's the moments when we can have glimpses of the divine or the self, right? And that's capital T, capital S, right? Yes. The collective self, right? We can have these glimpses, momentary glimpses, and it's like, oh, all the pain, all the armor, all the persona, all the bullshit, one side, gone, falls away, and you just are, like we could talk about, I could be love, I could be light, I could be pure energy. Right? It doesn't really matter. And at that moment, you experience, whether it's God, unity consciousness, the self, the numinous. Well, it really doesn't matter, right? Because they're all just names, right? Where we're just trying to grapple onto what that is. The challenge we have is that when we have these glimpses, is that all of a sudden you have this numinous, divine, the self energy plunge into ourselves and plunge into our bodies, right? And that can be really fucking confronting, right? Whether you call it Kundalini awakening or whatever you want to do it, right? And when it's your time, when psyche, you're not controlling this. When psyche decides it's safe, when psyche decides it's time, when psyche decides it's fortuitous, that's when it's going to happen. So just chop the fucking wood. When it happens, poof, all this energy will come into you, and and then that's all of a sudden when it can come down. It's amazing, but then afterwards, it can inflate ego.
Yep.
It can give people God Jesus complex, right? It will certainly shine light into your shadow. It will shine lights into other archetypes that are playing within you. Father archetypes, mother archetypes, shadow, all the different parts of it. And because this is so fucking new to us as a species of actually getting our head around us, and this is what we're kind of part of the journey, we don't get it, particularly with the shadow, we don't get it, so we project it out.
Yep.
Right. And that's when we don't want to see the suffering in the world. That's when we see the pain in the world. That's when we see the injustice in the world. That's when we see this, when we see that, when we see the other. And you're really sort of connected to the planet, and you see and feel it. And that's when you can get angry and enraged. And then it's I need to go and do something. I need to go in and sign up with Médecins Sans Frontières. I need to go and become a fucking life coach. I need to go and do this to save other people. Well, guess what? They're going to have their own numinous experience at the point that psyche thinks it's right. And you would be better placed taking all that energy and putting it back into yourself, right?
So if we're at the moment we're acquiescing too much, and people like the Bill Gates are just riding the wave, and then there are people on the other side of the spectrum who are, I guess, pushing away feeling into suffering or what
Yes.
it's like to have the shadow, embody the shadow, as well as projecting onto people. What's the best mode? Are we strictly, in your perspective, better off working on ourselves? Do we help other people delve into emotion and allow emotion?
So my hypothesis would be in. Because without wanting to reduce it, because it is a really big and nuanced argument. Well, for three reasons. One is, even in that enraged state, if this numinous energy that's been imbued upon you, you're spewing it out into the world, well, you're fucking wasting it.
Yeah.
Right. And it's not going to go and do its thing. And one more ranty Facebook post is not going to change the fucking world. If you think you're going to change the world with a meme, have a fucking wordges with yourself, right? Seriously. The reason why you're putting the meme out there is you're trying to talk to yourself. You're trying to legitimize yourself, right? The second thing is that, what use in the world can you be if you are in that state? What use in the world can you be to your wife, your husband, your daughter? They are owed, well, they're not, but you could say they are owed the best version of you, which is dropping into it, which is imbuing this numinous energy that is within you, and you dealing with that. Now, it does mean it gets untidy, right? Because, I don't think this is something that can be coached. I don't think this is something that can be, taught. I think it's just kind of listened to and co-explored because nobody's got it. Nobody's got like, you know, I'm 45, you're recently turned 30. I can't say, right, well, you know, when you're 32, this is going to happen. Like, or even if something happened when you were 32, I'm like, yeah, exactly. You know, I don't know, because it's a process, but it's going to show up. You know, I think it can only be co-explored.
Yeah,
is probably the best, closest description we could get. I think if it was just at the very least legitimized and normalized that this shit happens, you know, and that we're not all just rational, enlightened. And when I say enlightened, I mean as in post-enlightenment, when we just became rational and everything could be condensed and delineated and stuff like that. I don't mean enlightenment as in the Buddha enlightenment. You know, I don't think, you know, that we've gone as far as we can with that. Just thinking about shit.
Yeah.
There's more to do. And
time to feel it.
There is time to feel it. And so I think, if anything, and then once we start to try and receive and accept and embody some of this numinous energy, and that's not a fucking easy job, right? That's untidy. But you know, I mean, Jung himself, he went off, he was in effect psychotic for 3 to 5 years when he wrote the Red Book, which was the start of his work. You know, he wasn't doing this shit from the age of 20. He was doing it in the age of, you know, he went off the rails in his early 40s and stuff because he'd chopped enough wood that it was time to fucking make sense of it. And that's the key thing. One of the things that we're not seeing enough of at the moment, and you know, you know, Paul Holliday from the Human Excellence Project, him and I have spent, you know, we're actually a day apart in age.
Wow.
And so our journey's resonating quite a lot at the moment. And we start to see the epiphanies of, all the sales and marketing online and what's really happening. And do we need this coach? Do we need this happening? Do we need that? It's like, no, this stuff's just happening, right? And we need to just be around and hold space and co-explore. And some of the things that we believe that we need to co-explore, and I'm going to be doing a podcast with a guy called Thomas Bjorkman on this in a few weeks' time, is look at the basic human skills to help navigate the unknown. So we're dropping out of that whole predictable outcome world, that persona-driven world, and into the exploratory, more inner indigenous driven world. And what are some of the skills we need? Well, we need to be open. We need to be able to sit and genuinely listen to people. We need to explore different perspectives. You know, you've done shit tons of it. I've done shit tons of it. We'll talk about that in a minute. It ruins you. It ruins you for everyday life because everybody wants to condense things and reduce things down. You're like, well, no, because there's more nuance to all of this. And you know, it's exploring different, it's making sense in the world, understanding where your inner compass is, your truth. And also, you know, just having genuine empathy, not, please be nice to everyone empathy. No, fuck that. That's what end up being in the codependent world, right? Is empathy is like, I can be empathetic, but you know, love has many faces and it's not always a hug. Sometimes a kick up the ass.
Yeah.
Right. With the benevolence. You know, some of what I've just had to say could well have been triggering for people to listen to. You know, especially when I'm sitting there going, the fact that you're posting shit about child porn rings is a fucking waste of time. And in all fairness, you're being a buffoon. Right? Because you're missing the point. And let's not forget, right? Most of our politicians are buffoons as well, right? You know, Scott Morrison came out, I've just ordered 25 million vaccines, right? Did anybody watch Media Watch this week? AstraZeneca. We haven't even signed a memorandum of understanding. So, you know, why is he saying that? Politicians are just like most of us at the moment. We want to keep our jobs because it's uncertain times. And how do they keep their jobs? They'll say whatever you want. Right. If you want our government to not do stuff, everybody should just write to their MP and say, if you do this, I won't vote for you.
Simple.
Yeah, because then they'll lose their job. And they won't want to lose their job because they don't want to be out of a fucking job. Politicians are very straightforward. They are compromised by big pharma and stuff like that. But at the same time, I know we have this illusion of democracy, but it still works to a degree. So, Shit, there's loads in there.
That's good. I love it, man. You come prepared. Come with a fire in your chest. I love it.
I felt it important. You know, when I saw you post about wanting to talk about conspiracies, because I care about you, and because I care about other people, like I said earlier on, if I've triggered you, like I'm unrepentant, because I've done it benevolently, purposefully and benevolently. This is what I see. I spend time thinking about things possibly more deeply than others, whether that's because that's where I am in life or that's how I'm predisposed, I don't know. But it's benevolence. I'm not here to sport with people's feelings, but sometimes your feelings, critical feeling, is the thing that's getting in the way.
And I think if people are triggered, then it's probably a good time to check what is the trigger, where does it come from, and why is it there? Why is it still
the spot
relevant?
For further inquiry.
Because I think if I didn't know that I had the potential to be an asshole, or that I had the potential to go along with the herd, then I would be triggered as well. But it's just what you believe.
Like,
it's just what you see, and that's okay.
Big things are changing at the moment at a very deep level. Like collective psyche's doing a lot of things. So just ride it. It's going to be uncomfortable, but go easy on yourself. You don't have to do as much as you think you do. That's a myth.
You just have to be.
Yeah, be in it. I'm not abdicating free will. It's not all like, oh yeah, psyche's doing it. I'll fucking just chill out. Like, still, be a good human. It's not easy. Some days being a good human is legitimately saying, I'm fucking pissed off and I'm going to be a grumpy bastard and then apologise afterwards.
Exactly. I feel like this conversation's come at a really good time and it reflects sort of where I'm at. Like I took that stance and I was like, fucking post everything. I've got to challenge everyone, and then realised I was showing up as an asshole, and the why I wanted to do that is because I silenced myself. No one silenced me, I silenced myself.
If I'm going to be transparent, I could see, you're one of the few people I actually pay attention to online. I could see you doing it, and I was like, if you're doing it, many others are doing it, and I was concerned.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying you have to do what Bryn says, just because then you'll just zip from one false self to another.
No, but
just go explore.
I feel like this reflects where I'm at in terms of I did that for a few days, noticed the resistance to the feelings, dropped into the feelings, realized, okay, this is about me, this is projection, and now it's more a case of, okay, I'm open to talking about this stuff rather than I need to fucking talk about it because the government's pissing us off.
But also recognise you don't need to know. Right? I'll tell you a couple of things that you do need to know. The sun is good. The river is good. Nature is good. Hanging out with your family is good. Hanging out with your friends and just telling dick jokes and having a laugh. So you actually, that's funny, right? Yeah, there's time for deep conversation like this and I fucking love it. But then I can also go and have lunch with a friend the other day and we just told jokes for half an hour and I nearly wet myself with laughter. And stuff like that is good. Put the fucking phone down. I've told you how it's designed. I've told you why it's going to fuck you up. Put the fucking thing down. Breathe before you post. Just talk about stuff. Connect.
Thank you, brother.
Give it.